I'ma trust the whole damn process for the record, till we breaking records. Reminisce about the past days, now we rise and fly. Journeys to the sky, Azimuth inside my grip, always know the way now. Beauty fill my days now, take it day by day. Sound couldn't be prouder, cause you know we alive. Hey.
Welcome to today. We have a special guest today, Michael Vetsch. Michael Vetsch, right?
Yeah, that's the one. You got
I've been calling you Michael Vetsch this whole time, so hopefully it's right.
It's one of those ones where people typically say the first and last name. I don't know why, but it's always kind of been.
I think Vetsch is a fun name to say, you know?
It's a nice strong single syllable, yeah.
Exactly. It's great. Welcome, Michael Vetsch. Welcome to In Process. Thank you for being here. I'm just excited to chat with you and get to know more about you and your process as well as an artist. I'm going to start with the question that I always start with. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey into the arts, like what brought you in and where you're at right now?
I think one of the biggest things, I didn't really start doing much theater or creation stuff until high school. But growing up, I always loved being able to make my friends laugh. That was always one of the biggest things, like, what can I do to crack a joke? What can I act as? I wouldn't say that I was like a class clown, because growing up, very shy, incredibly shy. But in among my friends, it was always, I'm kind of the one who's got the quick wit, and that sort of led me into taking drama classes and going from there into actually working on productions and things. And that was like, oh, this is a place where you can really do a lot of that, and start picking up things like improv and stuff, where it's like this, like, it all kind of came together and clicked as this is where I can really shine and make a lot of people laugh at once.
Yeah, and being a class clown is a lot of work. Like, you're on all the time.
Yeah, not for me. I need my breaks.
Right? Yeah. And so you started in high school, and then from there you progressed to MacEwan, or do you have a pit stop between?
Yeah, no. Right out of high school, I had to go to MacEwan, and I guess we were a year apart.
We were a year apart. Yeah, you were the year above.
And you came there after, was it RTC that you were at?
I did. Yeah, I went to RTC first, and then I took a year off, and then I was like, I want to learn how to tap dance.
Nice.
That's literally why I went to MacEwan.
It's all about the tap.
It's always about the tap. But what about since MacEwan?
Yeah, after that, I just took some time, started auditioning for shows and things. Really the biggest thing sort of coming out of that, I made some friends working on a production of Rocky Horror one time, and they got me to audition for an improv company called Sorry Not Sorry Productions, and I have been with them ever since, like 6 or 7 years now.
Dang, that's a long time.
Yeah, time is weird.
Yeah, I mean,
it's hard to think that it's been that long, but yeah, it's just a great group, and they've all become really close friends to me, and really an artistic family in a way. And it's probably been one of the bigger focuses, and that has spun off into other types of comedy, like sketch comedy and things like that.
And can you tell us a little bit about what's the difference between like sketch comedy and improv as opposed to like a theater piece or like a stage production?
Gotcha. Yeah. This is one of the things of like getting to know this quite well for doing hand billing at Fringe. Be like, yes, my poster says sketch comedy. Do you know SNL? Do you know Monty Python? Kids in the Hall, if you're really, really Canadian about your content. But essentially sketch comedy, sort of short form written pieces. Oftentimes if you're doing a show, you might just have a selection of different little vignettes. They don't all have to connect together. But other times they're often like sketch comedy movies, which have a loose narrative that kind of strings things along. But yeah, just pre-written comedy, you can really sort of perfect the bits and escalations. And then flip side of that, improv, just being on the spot. You might have a few prepared things, or you might be drawing inspiration from the audience, but it's very much just you and whoever else is on stage throwing what you can down and seeing if it builds up to something.
And do you have a favorite between sketch and improv?
I think probably improv. It's where I definitely have the most experience. Sketch, the sketch group, the Debutantes that I've been a part of for a few years now, my connection through that was all entirely just other people who were also in the improv company. Yeah, and especially in creating stuff with sketch, I find I'm such a sort of flash idea person. I could pitch something or I can throw a line in, but to sit down and fully write out an entire sketch takes me a while sometimes. It either takes a while or I know it in an instant and it's done in half an hour.
Right. Yeah. I feel that. I feel like sometimes that can be funny off the cuff. But if someone's like, write a funny script, I'm like, I don't know. I don't know.
Is any of this? Have I ever been funny? I don't.
Right? Well, and there's this like weird line of like, For me, funny is like spontaneous. And so the idea of like planned funny is just, it's a new thing I'm wrapping my brain around.
That's definitely one where I find the improv and sketch almost lend themselves to each other. Because if you have the pitch idea, you can just sit down with other people and riff off it for a while and essentially improvise a little scene and then go back and look and say, okay, what worked in this? Did this bit made no sense at all? Let's take that out. What can we put in there that makes more sense with the overall arc of what we were building here comedically?
Right. And so do you have a lot of experience now writing like sketches, or are you more of like the worker, like the collaborator, and then someone else is kind of writing as you go?
I've written a few. Well, I guess more than a few. A few sounds like I've done like nothing for this company. No, there's definitely people within our group that are more suited to being the writers, and they generate a lot of sketches overall. I kind of fall more into like pitches and ideas, especially within this last little while in pandemic. It's been harder to find reasons to create stuff, like without having the ability to go out and put on a show or feature in a sketch collective or anything like that. So we've shifted to doing more video content where we can. And a lot of that, just to come up with ideas, is like, okay, what's a holiday coming up or something like that? And we'll sit and try and figure out, okay, what's something we can pitch off of that? And recently we were actually just trying to figure out a sketch for Groundhog Day to do a video. And people were like, do we even try anything? And I just threw an idea out. That's what we went with, and we ran with it. And now it's actually, we fully made a thing within like a week.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Where are these video contents being released?
Just through the Debutantes social media. We put stuff up on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, just kind of uploaded everywhere. Most of them should be at Deb's Sketch, DEBSSKETCH. That was way too hard to spell for me.
Sunday morning, you did great.
Oh, boy. But yeah, looking up Deb Sketch or the Debutantes YEG, even going to debutantes.ca, we've got all our stuff up there. Spinning up through that, we actually also, in the course of this pandemic, have started up doing a podcast of our own.
That's awesome. Yeah, I feel like a lot of companies have had to do that bit of a shift of like medium. How are we still storytelling in the pandemic, right? Which actually is what brought us together to work again. Because like we mentioned, we knew each other back in the day. We're not going to say when. A year ago.
Recently, quite recently.
Right? But yeah, now you're working for Azimuth as well. We get to do a podcast with you, but we also get to do a little animated short. And getting to work with you, it's been so cool to like see how your arsenal is so full of different voices you can pull out at any point. Can you tell us like where that kind of comes from? Like where that impetus or that kind of skill was harnessed?
Honestly, it's been one of like my long-running dreams to do more voice work. So getting asked to work on this project was really a dream come true in some ways to finally bust that out. But linking back to the idea of what can I do to make my friends laugh, one of the most common things was like do a voice, create a character, build a thing like that. So I've been doing it as long as I can remember, different accents and funny voices, things like that.
Do you have a favorite that you go to?
Oh, gosh. It's sometimes my brain just drifts and I kind of fall into doing different things just off the cuff. I don't really think about it. And then before I know it, I've been talking like this for an hour. And then whoever I'm with is like, Michael, are you okay?
You're like, right, this is not my voice.
Yeah, there was a long stint where a group of friends and I just did weird, like, piratey kind of talk, and it's like once you sink into something, it just kind of sticks around and you don't think about it.
Yeah. I'm glad you kind of like give us an example, because I was gonna be like, can you give us some voices?
I'm open for business on that front. Whatever you need.
And do you take inspiration from cartoons, or is it just kind of like you just start going and then you find a rhythm that makes sense?
I think it's sort of ingrained now, but a lot of it would come from cartoons that I watched growing up,
Right.
Things like that. I was always such a big fan of classic Looney Tunes. SpongeBob was also a big one that, like, just the process in which they recorded, where everyone was in the same room and was able to play off each other, very sort of radio show style production is like, it sparks so much inspiration in what you can do with other people, even just with voice.
Totally. Yeah, I'm so excited for the day where we can actually have more than like two people in the recording studio to do something like that. Because I think an improv one and we're cartooning around that would be so much fun to do.
Yeah.
Right? Now, can you tell us a little bit about like where you draw inspiration for some of your sketches?
It's a lot of the ones that I produce. It's just little things that I come across in the day-to-day. One of the more recent ones I wrote was a very silly sketch about Big Macs. Loose premise, they're just like... What if someone very devoutly thought the idea that it was called a McBig Mac? And it's very silly. It's absolutely silly, but I was outside walking around one night, and I happened to stroll through a parking lot that had a McDonald's. The idea popped in my head. This is one of those ones that was like, I had it done in an hour. I just sat down once I got home, and it was there. It was a full sketch that we have filmed and performed multiple times now.
I like the Big Mac was waiting for you. Was just
Yes.
right there.
It's somewhere down the years in the past, I'd already thought about it, I'm sure. Why? Who can say? I don't understand how my brain works.
Who can say, right? Now, going back to like your start as an artist and your kind of start as this career, like, do you have anything that like you wish you kind of would have known, or like any wisdom you've picked up that you're like, oh, this is something I should pass on?
Oh, that's a deep one.
I know.
I guess in something like, not everything always has to be perfect.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of, especially like right from the get-go in the creation process of something, not everything has to fall perfectly in place. And there was always something growing up that I was a bit of a perfectionist in things with schoolwork, stuff like that, working to get good grades and things like that. But like, creation can be messy, and that's sometimes a lot of where like something going awry will be a new idea or a new thing that you wouldn't even have considered as an option. So like, being open and almost craving the failures that come along is really so key to seeing what potential there is out there. Because your brain will always have an idea of, this is my initial instinct of where to go. And sometimes those instincts are super strong and you can find great stuff following that. But it'll often also close off doors if you immediately go through the one that opens right in front of you.
And so do you find that in those situations, like collaboration is where you really get to tear it apart and find the nugget of gold in there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's definitely one of the hugest things, is being able to work with other people. Like everyone's brains are different. Everyone will have a different perspective and different past things that they can bring to the table that you just... Like it's no one's fault that you don't have that, but you just don't sometimes.
When you're collaborating on a script and let's say there's two rivaling jokes that could go in, how do you kind of decide where to go?
Honestly, a lot of it comes down to just what gets the biggest reaction out of other people. Like it'll often sort of go up to committee in those moments where it's just what does everyone think overall, and oftentimes if a script is being sort of written by one particular person, they kind of have the final say to veto on that. Usually everyone, I love the people that I work with, they're always so open to being like, oh, you know what? I liked what I wrote, but your thing is perfect for what we needed here. It sets something up in a good pattern.
That reminds me so much of like a lot of the great collaborations that I've had in the past, where it's that selflessness of like, if we're working on something, it's not about my ego, like my joke being in there. And that's what I love about like collaborating, when you really let go and you really just work on like the piece. Kind of like therapists talk about how like you should always look at the leg of the stool that is the problem and not the leg of the stool that is you. You know?
Oh,
so
okay.
a stool will have three prongs. One will be you, one will be your circumstances, and one will be the problem that you're trying to fix. So if you don't focus on the problem, you're going to be like trying to fix yourself or your circumstances. Where if you use yourself and your circumstances to fix the problem,
those aren't the ones that are out of whack. That's really interesting.
Exactly. I like to remind myself of that a lot when I collaborate, because I also grew up kind of perfectionist. And so it's that idea of like, just let go and let God.
Totally.
You mentioned you're doing a lot of improv and sketch, but your training is in musicals as well.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite musical?
It's probably Assassins. That was one that I had the great pleasure to do while I was at MacEwan at the end of my first year. And something about it just, anytime I could go back and re-listen to it, I'm immediately sucked back into it, and the music just lives in my brain rent-free.
Yeah. What character did you play?
I was Sam Bick. Despite having training in musicals, as almost a long-running gag is that I often get cast in the speaking roles in a musical.
As a fellow speaker, I hear you. Yeah, a lot of the times I remember it'd be like, "Oh yeah, you're just really good at the acting part," and I'm like, "Okay, great." What's that say about the singing?
Yeah, am I not so good at that? I'm hoping it's not a dichotomy there.
Right? Should I be working on this?
I guess I got the part, but okay.
And now, following up, is there one that you've always wanted to do that you haven't had a chance to yet?
I think a dream one would be to work on Something Rotten.
Oh, yes.
That show is just so zany, full, like it's one of those ones that lands like a joke of second kind of thing. It's everything. There's always something going on with it that is hilarious, and it does have its moments where it finds like tenderness and strong emotional weight. But just overall, it's such a riot to see, or to be in it would be a dream.
I love the prophecy about musicals.
Mm-hmm.
That whole song is just perfection.
Ooh. It's definitely one of those ones for us people in the industry who is like, oh yeah, I get those are the references. Yep,
right.
You're doing them.
All of them.
You are doing
in
them.
there.
They are wonderful the way you're doing them.
The In Process podcast is brought to you by the Canada Council for the Arts and Azimuth Theatres traversing the Azimuth Multimedia branch. It is our aim to continue to introduce and deepen the relationships between our community and the artists within it. To keep this podcast going, go to azimuththeatre.com/donate to help with the continuation of this podcast.
Can you talk to us as somebody who works a lot in comedy, what the power of comedy is? Or I guess what it affords you as a performer?
Yeah, I think there's something inherent in comedy where it allows you to bring the audience on your side. Even if, like, in a comedic setup, if you're sort of the naysayer, if you're playing the straight man in something and you're, like, even if you seem like an unlikable person, you can bring the people on side if you're making them laugh.
And how has that kind of, because like a lot of what you're kind of hinting on is like the relationship and connection between the audience and the performers. And obviously with everything that's been going on in the last, year and a half, 2 years, I don't even know how long anymore. How has that kind of shifted, and how do you find ways to still connect to audiences in different mediums?
It's certainly harder because that's with the shift of sort of coming out of the physical space and moving into a lot more digital, everything online. There's just so much content out there that even if it's reaching people and people are seeing your stuff, there's not a guarantee you'll get the engagement back in like, oh, people will comment on something or they'll be like, wow, this really made me laugh or made me feel something. I'm going to share it on to someone else. It almost feels like a digital marketplace in a way. Like you kind of have to sell yourself a little more, which can sometimes be like, am I doing this because it's the thing I want to create, or am I doing this because it's something that will be shared, that will get the hits?
Right.
Kind of thing. And it rides a difficult line of, like, I suppose staying true to the integrity of what you want to create, but whether or not it will make a big hit or if it'll just be, you put something out, I guess. But
yeah.
In some ways, you just kind of have to hope that if you are doing at least it's out there, at least I'm doing something, it's keeping you going to be able to come back once we can have more in the meat space again.
Yeah, in the meat space.
Sorry, that was terrible.
No, we're going to get t-shirts made.
Are we sure that's not the podcast name?
Rebranding, we're doing it now. Now, you also got to work on Hardboiled a little bit, which is a podcast, almost like a radio play in a way.
Yeah. I guess they've pitched it queer film noir radio play was maybe the tagline.
It's
something
doing
like
well.
that.
It's still thriving on the charts. What was your favorite part of that?
Ooh. I think similarly to getting to do this, it was a chance to jump in and do voice work stuff. It's actually I've been able to do a few different sort of little radio play things over the course of pandemic, and it's been. It's weird to say it, but I've always sort of felt that performatively my voice has been sort of my strongest asset. Mm-hmm. Maybe much more so than what I can do physically or how I can project and do stuff that way. So getting a chance to try and do stuff in these audio specific mediums has been really, really rewarding to see, like, oh, I do have a huge range that I can bring to bear, even if I'm just sitting in the cramped back of my room behind some sweaters to record it.
Yeah, that's how you recorded it, hey?
Yeah. Moved a rack of sweaters, threw a blanket over top.
You probably had the same kind of similar experience. When the pandemic started, you started to see all of like these colleagues and friends that you know were just like, oh, I'm in my closet recording, or like, here we are, another Zoom show in my house. And it was just like, it was like obviously theater and over Zoom is like its own thing. But watching everyone kind of galvanize and go like, no, we're going to make this do. Like, it was so, for me, it was inspiring because I was like, okay, you're not giving up, I'm not giving up. And like together, I feel like the community kind of was like, okay, continue.
Yeah, there was so much sharing of just like, what are tips? What stuff would you use? How can I make this work off of the limited stuff that I have with no prep time?
Yeah, exactly. And I think as artists is something we have to really fall back on those moments where like, you know, maybe there's no gigs, but you're like, okay, I'm still doing the thing. I'm still going to sit down and write, or I'm still going to just like explore what I can make and what I can create. Where does that itch to create come from you?
There are moments where even just in every day, I want to do something. I always feel like I've just got this energy to do stuff, whether it's little bits or gags or with friends or just like setting stuff up, and like it's that general just desire there really pushes me to find places to output it, I guess. It's not to say that something isn't valid without the audience there, but there's such an exchange of energy that you don't get many other places. I think it's really the drive to find that and build that kind of connection that drives me, I guess.
Yeah. That's great. So you've mentioned to us that you work a lot on sketch comedy and improv, and that's kind of like how you work as an artist. But what else occupies your time nowadays?
Something that I've dumped into a little more over pandemic is doing some like digital drawing and video editing stuff. That's something as part of the podcast that I work on with my sketch group. We do little audiogram promo pieces that go out, and I've learned some new Premiere video skills in entering to that, and that's actually been something that's become very fulfilling. Is okay, what can I make on this tablet that I've got here at home? And it's sort of become very therapeutic to just, I'm just gonna sketch something and listen to other podcasts or music or something, and that's a way that I spend my time when I can.
Yeah, do you have a favorite podcast that you'd like to go to?
So lately, I've been listening to A More Civilized Age, which is a Star Wars: The Clone Wars podcast.
That's awesome.
That's who I am, I guess.
I like the pause you took because I feel like you were like, do I say this or do I say the other? Like,
is this really where I'm going?
Yeah.
That's where I'm going.
What else do you watch for TV?
I love a good anime.
Yeah.
It's another thing where it's just getting to see different styles of animation and how voice work comes into that is super inspiring, and especially in that industry for anime dub, you can see so many of the same voices or the same people but crop up with different characters, and it helps to inspire what would I do with different characters in that sort of a range in some ways. Not that I always go into it like I'm gonna take notes while I go through this episode of Demon Slayer, but like, yeah.
And you can't help but pick up things as you listen. I also have been delving a little bit into anime. Just started a little recently. But there's one that I love called Land of the Lustrous. I don't know if you've heard of it.
Ooh, I have not.
It's like these gem people. And then there's like this weird alien that's coming in to try to collect them because they're all different gems. And it's super beautiful. I think like for me, like what I love about anime specifically is like the beauty of the visuals.
Mm-hmm. They're so crisp.
Right. Yeah, especially even like, I know this is like kind of that line, but like Studio Ghibli films, you can pause that movie and look at the background and it is just...
It's every cell is a painting
right?
In such a beautiful way.
Oh, I love it. I've always felt so connected to cartoons in a way growing up. I just feel like it's a form of, I don't know, maybe it's the visuals aspect of it, but I find that it's a form of consumption that I really enjoy. You know, when something has some nice visuals and is like kind of chill and you can just like lay back and watch.
There's something also in cartoons where the rules of physics and things don't apply. You can get so expressive with a character when they're drawn. Yeah. That like whether like the extent that something can stretch or form in a huge shape and then how that contrasts to just the stillness of other things. Like it's such a wider range than the human body can typically do.
Yeah, and I love when the shift comes like on a dime. So obviously theater has a long history, a long trajectory, and it's very traditional in some of the ways that it's made still today. But I find that over the pandemic, there has been kind of new air brought into theater. What do you see this new air coming into theater being?
There's been a lot of experimentation with media, and I'd be interested to see how much more like cross media occurs. Even thinking back a few years prior and stuff, there had definitely been like streamed things or stuff that was sort of set up in like the medium of the performance is something is being filmed and but just broadcast live in a sense. And it'd be interesting to see how much more experimentation with that can come into the physical space even. Like where does, as you almost mentioned before, with a screen acting as another character, what can that, using that sort of perspective or lens, add to something? I think it'd be interesting. I think there's also been, in shifting to online, the onus has really come out to individual performers and creators to put more stuff out, and I feel like there's been a lot more opportunity for more indie groups and stuff to do things in that sort of space, and I wonder if that as a trend could continue to, like, once people have used this opportunity to sort of break out there and bring new voices into the fold, where will they go from there?
Yeah, totally. And I feel like right now is such an important time to listen to those new voices. Do you have a dream project in your mind that you're like really excited to maybe one day explore?
There is a script that my sketch group has written that we were originally going to do as a production for Fringe a few years ago, and then everything got canceled. And it's been kind of the one that, even when there were opportunities to do things at, say, last year's Fringe, which kind of occurred in a bit of a smaller way, but still a very beautiful little way, it didn't feel like the right moment to bring out this thing that we had worked so hard on and had a vision of, like, okay, we're going to be able to do this in full, in like the big way that we want it to be. And it was the first sort of project that we had collaborated on as a group that was more of a longer form narrative piece. And I'm just so excited to see what we as the Debutantes can bring forward with that kind of an arc in a narrative sense. Because I adore all of them. They're what they bring creatively in terms of like the short form pieces that we do, and like everyone's so good at that. But to see them grow and push themselves and like, okay, how can we think of something that has more longevity? That I really long for the day that we actually get to put on that show.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned the Debutantes, and you've also mentioned Sorry Not Sorry Productions?
Yes. Yeah.
So are both of those kind of collectives, like artist collectives, or do they work as like a company, or like kind of just, can you talk a little bit about the structure of how they work?
Sorry Not Sorry, I guess, works more as a company.
Okay.
Got like board and positions that are set up, and there's different pay structures that we've worked with over the years for once spaces are booked, how we can do shows. A lot of that's had to sort of shift based on, are we just streaming things? Are we actually putting stuff on? Do we have a space where we can do our weekly performances, or are we more limited? But then I guess the Debutantes lands more on sort of the collective side, where we just kind of come together and do it. Sometimes people have roles, sometimes those shift around a lot, but yeah, we just kind of bring stuff to the table where we can on that one.
Can you tell me a little bit of like how that works and the benefits that come from working as a collective as opposed to like as a company with structures?
I think in some ways it almost sort of evens the playing field.
Okay.
Everyone kind of, there will certainly be people who might have some more leadership positions or different things, but at least with the way that we've sort of approached it, there isn't one specific person bringing stuff to the table. It definitely feels like everyone has equal footing to contribute or to offer changes or voice opinions, and it becomes a very open working space in that sense.
Mm-hmm. And do you find that the products are similar to what you would get working in a structured approach, like a theater company with Sorry Not Sorry, and then working at a collective approach, which is more what the Debutantes do? Do you find that both the products kind of end up in the same place?
I guess they do sort of land in in similar places. It's just the journey there is different.
Okay.
Within the collective on the Debutantes, we often don't have quite as much long term, or like the planning is more fluid, I suppose.
Right.
Whereas things through Sornets or the company, they've got to produce schedules. They've got to figure that stuff out ahead of time, and then it comes with a lot of, okay, we'll be generating ideas for formats to do, and then it'll be a while until we see them because we have to sort of plan down the line. When can we get this particular group together to do that, or things of that sort? Whereas, even as I said with the Debutantes before, we came up with an idea and produced a thing in like a week. So it can be very on the fly for that because we just, wherever we happen to have time, if there's some other filming projects we've been working on as a Debutantes that's like, okay, this will have to wait a while just because schedules don't line up for it. And we're okay, we can fill the time with something else in the meantime. But it's a lot more in flux, and sometimes timelines are looser in that sense.
I feel like it would allow like that freedom you need to be able to tap into your creative side, right? Because you're not worried about timelines as much as you're worried about just like working.
Yeah, the deadlines often aren't as hard. It can just be, okay, we have an idea. We'll see if it does evolve into a full sketch or not, and we've got the time to let something sit or put it away and try and pick it up later.
Yeah.
It's not always, oh, we have to have the thing ready for when we've booked the space now.
Right. Yeah. Well, and especially nowadays, like with the spaces being digital, it's easier to shift dates, you know?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. All right. So one more question that I'm going to ask you, and this is a deeper one, but the idea of moving forward in our industry and kind of creating a safer ecology and kind of a more well-rounded industry for artists to be able to work in, is there anything that you kind of would love to see develop over the next couple of years?
I think a lot is being done in a very good way of developing policies and stuff that will help people be safe when they're coming together to work in things. I think a lot of individual accountability and onus also needs to develop, and a lot of that, like as things sort of normalize on the overall scale, it'll become a more inherent thing for individuals to all have. But I think as things change and develop, it just needs to grow as a culture as well, in a way.
Thank you for that. I know it's a bigger question,
Yeah,
and again, we all have aspirations, but that was beautiful. Thank you. All right, now I'm going to ask you I'm stealing this from Brene Brown's podcast, Dare to Lead, where one of my favorite parts of it is the last like 5 minutes or so are just rapid fire questions.
Okay.
And they're not as deep as some of the other ones I've been asking you. All right, ready?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh gosh, wait.
Take your time.
Shoot. I tried to sneakily get water, and then I messed up my mask. Okay, ready to go.
All right. So, what's your favorite snack?
A banana. I love a good banana.
A banana.
It's
All
simple.
right.
If you can have it on the go, I love it.
All right. Favorite cartoon?
Currently, Gravity Falls, I think.
Okay. Yeah, good one. Do you have a song that you're like really into right now?
Song. Ben, I'm a big fan of Ghost. Released a single that went along with the most recent Halloween movie called Hunter's Moon, and I've been listening to that one a lot.
Nice. Are you a fan of horror movies?
Not particularly. It was one that I came across more through the band than through the film, but it happened to come out for the film.
So, what's something you do to relax?
Play video games. I play a lot of video games. Sometimes they can be a little stressful, but overall the process of it ends up being relaxing.
Do you have a favorite one?
Any of the Legend of Zelda series, those are always go-tos that I will come back to again and again and again.
I still haven't played Zelda. I want to check it out on the Switch.
Ooh.
Yeah, I've heard it's beautiful. What is something you will do when you need to turn off your brain?
I'll just listen to some music. Often, like, in a similar vein, I often have some very good playlists of video game music, and I can find that just lets me mellow out and go somewhere else.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right, final one. This is an important one. What is your favorite flavor of ice cream?
Vanilla. I've got basic tastes in that way. Vanilla is my go-to. I love it.
Oh, Michael, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. Thanks for chatting with me.
Thank you for having me.
We've known each other for so long, but like it's really nice to like actually chat and get to know you a little bit more. So thank you for this. In case anyone's looking for you, where can people find you?
Oh, most of the stuff that I end up doing, bigger stuff, will be through the Debutantes. So as mentioned before, debutantes.ca. The podcast that we produce is called Quantum Kickflip. And that's from a game that was developed by a local Edmonton artist and writer. So go check out Quantum Kickflip for some fun sci-fi adventure time.
Thank you again for y'all listening. And thank you again to Selena Pecho for being our amazing tech, for listening to us for hours, and for just being part of the team. Thank you all. Michael, any last words before we go say goodbye? No pressure.
Oh, jeez. Keep laughing.
Keep laughing.
Be open and be able to laugh.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Thank you to everyone, and we'll see you next time. Hey, pal.
Enjoying the conversation? Traversing the Azimuth is a brand new branch of Azimuth Theater, aimed at connecting artists with a wider community, deepening mutual understanding, and getting to share each artist's process and journey.
If you would like to continue hearing these amazing stories, you can help out by going to azimuththeater.com/sponsorship and sponsor Traversing the Azimuth. Your sponsorship will go straight into paying more artists to come and share what it means for them to be proudly in process.
We would also like to take this moment to thank the Canada Council for the Arts for their support in the pilot of this project.
For more information on Traversing the Azimuth, go to azimuththeater.com/traversing.